Guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're keeping well. Now today we're going to be doing things a little bit different. I'm going to play the whole segment for you and then I'll come with my analysis. Just very quickly, let me just introduce it. Fuse ODG, who's an Afrobeat singer, music creator, he's basically talking about Band Aid. So Band Aid is basically a charity Christmas single comprised mainly of British and Irish musical artists. So they come together, they collab, and they basically sing for Band Aid, and the proceeds go to Africa. And basically, from what you're going to see in the clip, Fuse ODG has a problem with the lyrics, and he has a problem with Band Aid in general. He says that it does more harm than good. But anyway, guys, I'm not going to stretch out the intro too long. I'm going to play it for you, and then I'll come with my analysis at the end. So stick around to the end to hear my analysis as well.
Hey, it's a privilege to have you here, Fuse. Thank you for coming in.
I really appreciate you.
Not at all. I appreciate your time, sir. What are your problems with the lyrics?
I have a lot of problems with the lyrics because it doesn't represent the truth of what is in Africa and what was. Lyrics such as "There's no peace and joy in Africa this Christmas." Every December I go to Ghana for Christmas, and millions of people come to Ghana for Christmas and actually enjoy themselves. So there's no truth in that. And another problem that I have with it is talk. It was a situation that was one country in crisis, but somehow the lyric encapsulates a whole continent, saying that there's no peace and joy in the whole of Africa this Christmas. And I always liken it to the fact that, Ukraine is in crisis right now, but would we make a song saying there's no peace and joy in Europe this Christmas? So I feel like that in many folds, it depicts a truth that's not really true.
What is the true face of Africa now?
The true face of Africa is a place of opportunities and investment, a place where you can have a great time, a place where you can genuinely have a holiday and take your family to. But I feel like the perception of Africa does not portray that due to what the mainstream media portrays, and I feel like it's now time to really tell the truth of what is in Africa, which is a place where you don't have to just give £2 and get on with your life. You can actually go and spend 2,000, in a week.
You were asked to take part in Band Aid 30 10 years ago. Obviously, you declined. It was for those reasons. Was it Bob Geldof who asked you? How did it work out?
He actually phoned me and he asked me to be a part of it. And straight away, I let him know that, I love the idea of actually raising for the current crisis, which was the Ebola crisis at the time. But I just said to him that, especially, giving is good. And I love that the British public love to give when it's time when there's a crisis. But what I pointed out to him was that it's the model, it's the way that it's been executed. There's a way that we can raise money for the people in crisis without taking away their dignity, their pride, their identity. We can raise it in a dignified way. Same way we've done for Ukraine. We've raised 200 billion for Ukraine in a dignified way. The same can be done. So when I did express at the time, he said he's been doing this for over 30 years and he's not about to change it now for anyone. So I did actually come with the alternative. We can change the lyrics because I'm going there this Christmas. And with the caliber of artists that are on this song, surely we can make a song that can uplift in order to support these people, because we were all in the top 10 at the time. So it wasn't really about the lyrics.
How did he respond, Fuse?
He just said it's not about to change now.
But it was friendly, though, was it?
It was friendly in the sense that, but it was very it's just straightforward. I said I made a suggestion because I genuinely feel like if you want to help somebody in crisis, the best person to listen to are the people going through it.
Sure.
Right. So I felt like when I gave them that kind of angle where we can actually raise and still, maintain the dignity of the people, because if you remember when they even launched Band Aid on ITV, on X Factor, there was a dead body being dragged, a dead body of an African being dragged across our television, and I felt like there's just a way better, there's a much better way to do things without having to take away the dignity of a whole continent.
But 40 years ago, and I know you weren't even on this planet then, but 40 years ago, you did actually say you wanted to know what Africa was. I mean, parts of Africa 40 years ago were in desperate need of help, weren't they?
Parts of Africa were in desperate need of help. Parts of Europe were definitely in need of help too. Again, it's how you do it.
Yeah.
There's no problem with raising money for a crisis. In the short term, it makes sense. On surface level, it makes sense. But in the long run, and I'm speaking as a child of who grew up in an era where these images of, Band-Aid and initiatives like it have been on our screens for years, it really affected me as an African living in the UK.
In what way did it affect you?
Where I was not proud of who I was, who I am. I wanted to disconnect with being African, because whenever anything that was related to Africa would come, all my friends in school would be laughing. Do you get it? So that, imagine your child going to school and being embarrassed of who they are because of how the media has portrayed them. So for me, it's like the way it's affected me and everybody, from my generation. I just want to create a better world from my child.
Yeah.
Growing up in the UK or growing up outside of Africa, I want them. Because there's such an imbalanced view of the world. I just want my child to grow up in a world where they can feel proud of who they are and just be themselves.
So what should the future of Band-Aid be now?
I think he needs to, it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
Right?
40 years on the 25th.
For any business person, after 40 years, you have, and if you're not seeing results, because I haven't seen any results, if I'm being honest, like, he needs to relook at the model.
You don't think it's done good?
I think it's done more bad than good.
Band-Aid has done more bad than good.
More bad than good, because
it's raised tens of millions of pounds,
and it's also cost us in trillions.
How's it cost you in trillions?
So okay, I'll give
it cost Africa in
I'll
trillions?
give one example.
Please, yeah.
I'll give one example.
Yeah.
Because of the image, the negative images that's been portrayed of the continent, Africa is seen as a high risk profile, and as a result of that, we get high interest rate on our sovereign debts. Right, it's costing us 3.2 billion every year.
Okay.
Right, and you're saying Band-Aid raised millions. That's one example.
Yeah.
Another example is I partnered with the Ghana government for this initiative called the Year of Return that enables people to come to Ghana and just enjoy Africa firsthand. Right, we managed to raise in that year 1.9 billion for the economy.
Wow.
Right. Before that, we were giving out 45,000 visas. During that, we gave out 750,000 visas. Now, imagine this scaled across the continent, and all the countries in Africa positioning themselves like that. Yeah. So that's potential revenue that we've lost over the years. And when you work that out, it's about 100 billion per year. You get it? So we've lost in trillions. That's the second example. The example that really just destroys me is my child growing up in this world and not feeling proud of who they are. Them losing their sense of pride and identity because of these kind of images.
Will your child be British African or African British? What would she identify as first, do you think?
Identify as a human being.
Right, but are they African or are they? What would you want them to be?
I want my child to be African because that's who I am. But I want same way if you're from Ireland or if you're Swedish, you just want your child to represent who they are. Right, and that's the kind of world, and I feel like being in England, that's how it's supposed to be, different cultures, but embracing the different cultures. And I think what Africa has really been suffering over this side of the world is that the lack of representation. Us not showing that. I'll give a perfect example. The Ebola crisis, Band-Aid raised money for the Ebola crisis, but what Band-Aid forgot to mention was that the Ebola crisis was solved by an African from Congo called Dr. Jean-Jacques Moyembe, right? So there's like an imbalance of how Africa is portrayed, and I feel like it's now time to really we need to counterbalance that, and we've been doing that with an educational app that we've built called School of New Africa, and it's meant to tell the stories of Africa's contribution to the world.
Where is the School of New Africa?
It's on the App Store. You can just go and download it now. It's an app that teaches Black history in a gamified way, and we're really focusing on the next generation and really building them up, because when my child steps out, I know the world would have a certain view of them. Our mission is to counterbalance that. Is to just put out the Africa that we know, the truth that we know, the powerful people that have come before us. Because I feel like there's such an imbalance that my child would feel inferior whenever they step outside their house. So I want to balance that with this app that we've launched.
How significant was Ed Sheeran's intervention in this, Fuse?
It was super significant, and I think it's the perfect example of how we should be as human beings. And I feel like a lot of people have kind of expressed that they kind of feel guilty for giving, because I've given a perspective where I'm saying that we've lost in tourism, we've lost in investment, we've lost in trade opportunities, but you gave money to help. And
you know, people were buying it for all the right reasons, don't you? They weren't buying it because they wanted to keep Africa repressed.
This is why I'm giving an example of Ed, because Ed was part of the 2014 one, and he did it with the greatest intention. Right? When I spoke to him and I gave him the perspective from my side on the effect they had on my generation, and you know how we need to just change the way that we give, he understood where I was coming from.
Did he get it straight away?
He understood it straight away, and he was like, we had a conversation, and the idea was like, if anybody's going through a crisis, just listen to them and ask them how. Don't just say this is what you need. We speak, we have a conversation, we have a dialogue. It shouldn't be just a monologue, just you just saying this is what you need. It's about us having a dialogue and actually finding a way forward, and it becoming a partnership. And I always say it needs to be solidarity over charity.
Okay, coming to the last minute or so together. So when next week Band Aid 40 is released, should people not download it and buy it? What should people do?
Not this version, because
even though it would raise money for charities in Africa.
And I've also
I hear your arguments.
I've also reiterated the long-term effect of what it's gonna have on us. If anything, stream the song that I'm putting out. We know it's Christmas, because it talks about the progress, and it celebrates a culture, and the proceeds of that will go to initiatives that are developing projects, innovative projects that are helping with the development of the continent.
How disappointed are you that Bob Geldof and others haven't listened to your message, Fuse?
It's frustrating. It's frustrating more than anything else, because I get it. The intentions were there in the beginning, but 40 years later, we are the grown children of the people that you were helping, and we're telling you that it did not help us in the way that you thought it was going to help us. We lost in the end. So let's find a way to move forward.
I'm going to play a little bit of your We Know It's Christmas in just a second. Before I play that, well, first I want to thank you. Secondly, if ever I take holiday, I mean, you've got to come in. You can just... man, can he talk.
Okay, so guys, just to conclude very quickly, Fuse ODG brings up a few reasonable points in this interview. He speaks about how the Band Aid lyrics do a disservice to the reputation of the African continent, and then he relates it to the current conflict going on in Ukraine, and he says how, you know, there would never be a Band Aid song to say there needs to be peace in Europe. So I've said this many times before on this channel, and I've highlighted the key reasons as to why Africa cannot progress, and Band Aid shouldn't even be on the list. You know, Africa have bigger problems to focus on, and I believe Fuse ODG needs to be channeling his anger towards the corrupt African system than a few Band Aid lyrics that proceeds will be spent and given to help certain countries on the African continent. I believe Fuse ODG needs to channel his anger towards a very corrupt bureaucratic system that seeks to hold the continent, the people, the progression of Africa back. The system is to blame for why Africa is in the mess and why Africa has so much political tension, economical tension, social unrest. There's a kleptocracy of just governors and presidents stealing, siphoning off funds by the billions, not even by the millions, by the billions in dollars. In addition to that, there's religious conflicts, tribal conflicts, ethnic conflicts. The conflicts and the uncertainty just keep on going in Africa, and something needs to be done about that. There needs to be an existing and an effective domestic policy that's implemented by all African governments to ensure that their nations prosper and succeed. African nations have been free of Western colonialism for 50, 60 years now, 70 years. You know, the 60s and 70s is when most African nations had independence. And when independence was fought for on the continent, we saw that economies were strong. There was jobs. The currency was very, very strong. There was no political turmoil. And after that, we've seen corrupt politicians in Africa run those countries, all countries in Africa, to the ground, with the exception of just a few African countries that I can name on one hand. The rest have ran their countries into the ground due to just a poor domestic, it's not even poor, it's a non-existent domestic policy, and foreign policy just doesn't exist. Because your domestic policy is so bad and you're not even generating any money. So how are you going to have an effective foreign policy? In addition to that, Fuse ODG talks about the debt that currently accumulates in Africa, but he fails to bring up the current trade between African nations and China. China have been trading with African governments largely for about 2 to 3 decades, and what we've seen is those African nations are in debt to China because of gullible politicians taking out loans that they know they cannot pay back. They default on that loan, and then China sweep in to take the ports, to take the key infrastructural sites, to take certain key resources, etc. And we've seen Russia follow suit, and we've seen India follow suit. So what's going on is every nation have understood that the African governments are very incompetent, and now they're going there to take for themselves whilst they disadvantage the African continent, all because the politicians in Africa allowed that to happen. So I believe Fuse ODG needs to channel his anger towards corrupt elected officials on the continent, and he needs to leave a few lyrics in this Band-Aid song alone. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.